What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Knives of the Round Table. My name is Marco, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Custom Knife Factory Rampage. The Custom Knife Factory Rampage is the latest model from Custom Knife Factory, and I've had this one for probably about 2 weeks, 3 maybe, and man, this is a good one. So let me give you a tour of the knife, and this is probably going to be a bit of a longer review, just because there's a lot to like in this knife. So what you have here is a drop point blade that is, I mean, it has a little bit of a flat, but it has a lot of belly here. You've got this kind of vapor satin that you have here, like very matte, silky on the main grind. You have hand rub satin on the flats. You have a swedge that comes down to a pretty robust tip because the steel carries over from here all the way to the tip. You have a thumb stud deployment, and take a look at that. That is a little skull encased in Damascus. Do you see that? That is just incredible. You have Damascus around the pivot collar, around a very generous pivot. I believe that's like something like T20 or something. It's an M390 blade. This is number 198. As you can see right there, they're numbered. You have a Damascus pocket clip. You have this this back spacer. I'm not sure what the material is. It could be carbon fiber or G10. And it's a titanium frame lock. It has a lock bar insert, and it also acts as an over travel stop. So that's what you've got here. So let me show you the size comparisons, because this is, you know, a great size for knife. So that's the PM2, that's the PM3. So very much in the neighborhood of the PM3. You can see handle wise, you know, very much in the neighborhood of the PM3, a little bit more blade, probably more than the PM2. So right in that really nice sweet spot of size for EDC. Now that is your Benchmade bug out, and here's your mini bug out. And what you see is lengthwise is very similar to here. It is a little bit of a thicker boy. Let me show you the thickness comparisons here. So that is the thickness of the bug out. That's the thickness of the Rampage, and here it is against the PM3. Okay, so it is a chunkier boy. It is not light. You can feel the heft, but if you followed my channel for any length of time, you know that I like when it's a more solid, and or the feeling of heft in my hand. But here the heft mostly comes from the blade. So the blade stock is thicker than the PM2. And I don't know if you can tell, let me try and see if I can show you. It is heavily skeletonized inside, and it's actually engraved inside. There's Custom Knife Factory on the inside when I opened it up. I didn't take a photo of it, but hopefully you can see the skeletonized inside. So that's what you have here. That's for size. It's an excellent size. It fits the hand very well. So let's start. Let's start with ergonomics. And the ergonomics on this thing are very, very good. This cutout that they've done here, it gives you really good access to the lock bar. You're not. It's very easy to just disengage. But when your index finger wraps around here, it just falls naturally to that spot, and it locks you into the knife. And even though the titanium has no texture, your hand just naturally gravitates to that position right there. Either in a hammer grip or a saber grip, it just tells you exactly where to hold it, and it's very, very comfortable. I don't find any hot spots on holding the knife this way, and it's very, very nice to use, very nice to cut. Man, I've got fingerprints all over it. It looks nasty. So I would say that the ergonomics are really, really good. The pocket clip, it's angled that way, so it'll sit, sideways in the pocket. If your pocket sits here, it'll push that way when closed, right? It'll try and pull that way. It also doesn't touch the lock bar, which means that it never puts any pressure on the lock bar. The lock bar is just free to do its thing. So ergonomics, really, really good. It is front heavy, and it's not something that ever bothers me, but the balance point does feel a little front heavy, and it's because the thickness of the blade is significant, and it's a heavily skeletonized titanium, so you do get a little bit of a knife that feels a little bit front heavy. Now when I try and balance it, the balance does feel like it's right around there, okay, which is where it should be. But what I'm telling you is that it feels a little bit front heavy when you hold it in your hand. That's just what it feels to me. Now let's talk action, and action is just incredible. It's thumb stud only, okay, and there's only a thumb stud on one side, so that's the only way to deploy it. There's no flipper tab, there's no thumb stud in the back, there's no way of spider flicking it, so it's thumb stud only. So some people have removed the Damascus collar from it and just kept that little skull in there as a pivot, as a thumb stud. Some people have rotated the skull and the collar around this thumb deployment, just so that it points that way. Because as it's pointed right now, I don't know if you can tell. Let me see if I can show you here. Maybe that way. Yeah. So it's shallower on this side and it's higher on this side. So it's ramped up that way. So it's meant for you to push directly in that direction. But your finger really wants to push in that direction, right? When your finger's here, it wants to push that way. And so the orientation of this, I can see why people are rotating it, and I may end up doing that myself. But as it deploys very reliably, and it just drops shut. And again, it's a heavy blade, so you can feel that it's just gonna drop shut. The action on this is phenomenal. It's one of the best actions that I've felt on a custom knife factory. And I have a lot of them. I have the Grievances, I have the Snafu, the Satori, the Evo 2.0, the Sakosha. I have all of those, and I think the action is probably, closing action is probably the best on this one. Again, usually I like flipper tabs for deployment, but as far as thumb stud deployment goes, this is just excellent. It is outstanding. Now, fit and finish. Well, no, let me talk about cutting before I do fit and finish. So this is a thick blade, and because it's a thick blade, through cuts, going through cardboard or those kinds of things that I've done, it's not as slicey as what you're gonna get from a bug out or a thinner blade, or even something like a Para 2. This is a thinner blade, and it's flat ground from the top to the bottom, right? It's flat ground completely. This one is more of a saber grind, and the flat actually carries down about 40% of the blade. So you get a little bit thinner, but it's fairly thick behind the edge over here. So it's hard to say that a custom knife factory knife is meant to be a little bit of a heavier use, especially when you've got things like the skull and the Damascus and those kinds of things. But I can tell you that the construction of a titanium frame lock with an M390 blade that thick, with this grind going that to that edge, it feels like it's more of a heavier duty knife than say something like the Evo, right? The Evo, it's much slicier. It gets to a ridiculously thin edge, right? And this one does not. This one it feels a lot more robust, and because it feels a lot more robust, it's less slicey than a lot of the other knives out there. Again, for my EDC tasks, almost any blade will do. But if you're cutting through things, then this is probably a bit thick. Now, it's an awesome knife, and you might still want it, but I would say that don't think of this as a very, very slicey knife. Certainly the Evo 2.0 is much, much slicier than this. The Sokosha, for example, it's a much slicier knife, and I can probably, yeah, I have them over here. So let me kind of show you what I'm talking about here, if I can. So on the Evo 2.0, it gets to a very, very thin edge behind the secondary bevel. So this just slices through. It's crazy the way this slices. Let me show you what I've got here. Okay, snafu. So this one, it feels like they're probably the same blade stock, but even then, I think this one even comes, I think this is a hollow grind, so this one comes to a thinner edge on this. The Sokosha, okay, the Sokosha is a little bit thinner stock, and the flat is just very small, so it comes down to a thinner edge. So I think all of these knives are a little bit slicier than what you get from the Rampage. But again, I think that the Rampage, the size, and the fact that it's a little bit more stout, it gives me a feeling of a little bit more confidence in the knife. And I think because of that, it'll probably end up being a knife that I even use more than my Evo. I love my Evo. I think it's my favorite custom knife factory knife. But I do worry about that tip, and I do worry about that blade at the end. I mean, I take it when I know for a fact that I'm not gonna need any harder use. So I think this is a knife that I may end up carrying just a little bit more on more of a daily user. Let me show you the size. So I've always said that 3 1/4 inches probably by sweet spot. This is just a tad shy. This is a 3 1/8, but it's the size of this one is just really, really, really good. Now, I want to talk about fit and finish, and here is where this knife just becomes incredible. So you have a lot of details on here. So you have, let me try and get close here. So you've got the Damascus pivot collar, right, on one side. On a really, really nice pocket clip, you've got the Custom Knife Factory. You have a little spot for, you see how this cutout right here, it's not a stop pin. It's not a place where the thumb stud is gonna end up resting. It's just a contour to follow the contour of the thumb stud. It just follows that contour really, really good. You have this this cutout, and again, the access to this lock bar is really, really good. So it's something that makes the knife very fidgety. It's just really, really good. It's very easy to disengage. It's not hard at all. You've got the same thing on the back. You've got the marking of the M390 blade, as you can see here. And let me show you something, and I thought this was very interesting. I've never seen this before. You see how the screws come into the sides of the pocket clip? I don't know if you've seen that in any knife before, but that is just something that's really, really nicely done. I mean, it just sits in there, and then you have two screws that go in from the side. That's just a really, really good detail. I love how they did that. You know, in a place where the pocket clip is an afterthought for a lot of knives, right? You take knives, you know, some even more expensive knives, and sometimes it's an afterthought. And here they just did a really, really nice job. This just looks amazing. You can see even the layers of the Damascus on the side of the pocket clip, and then you have this back spacer that's screwed up. That is screwed just from the back, so that from the front all you see is these two dots. So it leaves the front with this very, very clean look. You've got a lanyard hole that's not prioritized because the blade just hides in there, and this just carries really, really, really nicely. You know, when I saw it at first, I thought this knife looked a little simpler than some of the other knives, right? You have, when you have the snafus, you know, that looks, you know, kind of with a little bit more design. Even the Satori has a more interest in the blade, right? There's all these knives from Custom Knife Factory, you know, the Sekoja with the carbon fiber. And initially, I was like, this looks too simple. But when you get it in your hand and you start looking at all of these things that they've done, I have to say that this one's growing on me by the day, and it's just becoming one of my favorite CKF knives of my collection. So I think there's going to be another drop of these, and if you can, I would highly suggest that you try and go for it. This is one that you really want to have. It's robust. It's more a thing that you would carry every day. It's not gaudy. It's understated, but there's a lot of tiny little details that really set it apart, and I think this is just great. Airing of grievances. I have one airing of grievance, and that is this little point right here. And it's not when you're holding the knife. When you're holding the knife, this feels really good in hand. It just lands perfectly. Your finger goes there perfectly, no hot spots. The problem comes when you're deploying it. And when you're deploying the knife, at least for me, the way I'm holding it and the way I deploy it, when I push out this part of my finger right here rubs exactly against that point. So maybe it's the way I'm opening it. Maybe I should go sideways, and maybe that won't happen. But in the way that I want to do it naturally, in the way, you know, when you hold a knife and you want to just deploy it, the way I do it, it pokes me a little bit every single time. And it's the only thing that I can tell of this knife that really makes me not enjoy it. Again, this has become, I want to say that it's a tiny little nitpick, but I wish that they just kind of rounded it off this way, just a tad bit. I think you know, because everything else in this knife is just, you know, it's contoured in that direction. It's just really ergonomic. It's just that thing, you know, with the way that I deploy it, it just hits me right there. Well, guys, this one is a great one. I love this knife. This is incredible, and I'm really glad that I got to make the drop for this one. I didn't make it on the first drop. I got it on the second drop, and I believe there'll be a third drop here soon. So, guys, hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, then like and subscribe. Do not get notified. Nobody likes to get more emails. You know where to find my content if you ever want to see more videos. And until I see you at the next one, take care.